She had the ticket, she had the seat, and still, within minutes of boarding, a flight attendant leaned in and told her to move. Phones lifted. Whispers spread. In 2A sat Maya Ellison, 24, composed, a young black woman who carried herself like quiet weather. Was this a simple error, or the oldest story told in a new cabin? Who decides who belongs in first class when the records say yes, yet the eyes say no? If your dignity is challenged in public, do you lower your head to arrive on time, or raise the stakes so the truth arrives first? What turns a jet bridge into a witness stand and a cabin into a boardroom? Who stepped up beside her, who tried to look away? And how did a calm voice reshape an airline before the wheels even touched the runway? Tonight we follow Maya through the rain-streaked window, the heavy hush, the questions that cut deeper than policy. This is not just a flight. It is a test of character, a reckoning with bias, and the beginning of a different sky. If stories like this matter to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more voices, more courage, and more truth to light. Let us begin. The plane smelled faintly of leather and recycled air, that sterile mix every traveler knew, and yet it still felt like a small luxury. First class was quiet, almost like a sanctuary compared to the chaos outside at the boarding gate. The windows framed a gray sky. Rain streaked down the glass in fine lines, blurring the runway lights beyond. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, faint enough to sound like a low drumbeat, but near enough to remind everyone that their flight would be taking off into unsettled skies. Maya Ellison tucked the strap of her carry-on beneath her feet, smoothed her blazer, and let out a measured breath. She was 24 years old, young enough to be underestimated, but steady in a way that made her seem older. Her braids were pulled neatly into a bun, her cream-colored blouse crisp against the darker fabric of her jacket. She didn't look like someone searching for attention. If anything, she looked like someone who had learned to carry herself lightly, invisible when she wanted to be, visible only when she chose. She slid into seat 2A, the soft leather firm but welcoming beneath her, and rested her hands on her lap. Around her, other passengers shuffled and an older businessman muttering into his phone. A couple arguing softly about luggage, a young mother calming her toddler. Just another flight, just another Tuesday, except it wasn't. As she adjusted the seatbelt across her waist, she felt it the stare, the kind of stare that wasn't just curiosity. It was weighted, assessing, suspicious. She glanced up, a flight attendant, tall, clean-cut, with a badge that read Thomas Green. He was watching her in a way that made her spine stiffen. "Excuse me, miss," he said finally, leaning just slightly closer than necessary. His voice was calm, almost polite, but the tone carried an edge. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Maya blinked. "Yes, 2A. May I see your boarding pass?" She handed it over without hesitation, her nails short and unpolished, fingers steady. Thomas scanned the ticket with his eyes, then looked back at her. His lips pressed thin. "This is first class," he said, slower this time, as if explaining something to a child. "I know," Maya answered softly. Passengers nearby were already starting to notice. The businessman 2 rows back raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The couple fell silent. A murmur of energy hummed in the cabin, the kind that comes when people sense something is off, but aren't sure if they should interfere. Thomas's jaw tightened. "I think there's been a mistake. We've had issues with duplicate bookings before. I'll need you to step out so we can resolve this." Her heart skipped. The words were familiar, almost rehearsed. She had heard variations of this scene before, not always in airplanes, but in restaurants, in hotels, in offices where she was told she didn't belong. The memory of them pressed against her ribs, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she kept her voice even. "There's no mistake," she said. "This is my seat. The ticket is valid." For a moment, there was only the sound of rain against the window. Thomas exhaled sharply, clearly frustrated that she wasn't obeying quickly enough. "Miss, please, you can wait at the gate until this is sorted. We need to get this flight moving." Maya felt the weight of a dozen eyes on her. Her chest tightened. She thought of her grandmother's words spoken so many times. In so many contexts, you don't always have to raise your voice. Sometimes your calm is the loudest protest. She unclasped her seatbelt, slowly, deliberately. "Fine," she said. "Let's sort it out." The aisle seemed longer than usual as she walked back toward the boarding door, the hush of whispers following her. Her cheeks burned, but her stride stayed steady. She forced her breathing into a rhythm inhale. Exhale. Not anger. Not yet. Control. At the gate, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Rachel Kim, the gate supervisor, glanced up with surprise as Thomas approached with Maya in tow. Rachel looked younger than she was, her round glasses slipping down her nose as she tried to process what was happening. "She claims this is her seat," Thomas said flatly, handing over the boarding pass. The word claims hung in the air like smoke. Rachel scanned the pass, eyes darting across the screen. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at Thomas, then at Maya, her discomfort visible. "This pass is—" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "It's valid." Thomas frowned. "Check again." "I did." Rachel straightened her glasses. "It's valid." "She's assigned to seat 2A. Maya's pulse drummed in her ears, but outwardly she remained still. Her grandmother had always told her that patience was a kind of power. Let them reveal themselves before you speak. Rachel looked like she wanted to apologize, but instead she glanced nervously at Thomas. "Maybe we should just rescan it in the system, to be sure." Maya finally let herself speak. "That's fine," she said quietly. "Scan it again. Do whatever you need. But I'm not going anywhere until it's documented that my ticket is real." Her voice was steady, calm, yet the firmness in it made both Thomas and Rachel pause. Behind them, other passengers leaned forward in their seats, curious, unsettled. The elderly woman in 3C, later Maya would learn her name, was Gloria Bennett, watched intently, her hands folded over her lap. A teenage boy nearby, Jordan Alvarez, had already raised his phone, the red light blinking as he began to record. Maya stood there, under the sterile lights, her body taut but her expression serene. Inside, though, her thoughts wrestled with themselves. Should she push back harder now, or would patience carve the sharper edge later? She hated that she even had to ask herself this question. She hated the familiar knot of humiliation curling in her stomach. But she also knew something else. This moment wasn't just about her. It never was. And deep down, she had a sense, call it instinct, call it legacy, that the story of this flight was only beginning. The terminal outside the gate was buzzing with the sound of boarding announcements, rolling suitcases, and the faint smell of overpriced coffee drifting from the kiosk nearby. Yet inside that small pocket of space by the gate counter, time seemed suspended. Maya stood still, her ticket clutched loosely in her hand now, the paper soft from where her fingers had pressed it too tightly. She could feel the quiet storm of eyes around her. Passengers pretending to scroll their phones but stealing glances. A child tugging at her mother's sleeve, asking why the lady had to get off the plane. A businessman checking his watch, annoyed not at the injustice, but at the delay. Rachel Kim leaned closer to the gate computer, typing with a nervous rhythm. The fluorescent light above her desk hummed faintly, adding to the sense of discomfort. Maya could see the hesitation in her posture, the way her shoulders curled slightly as though she wanted to shrink away from confrontation. Thomas Green, however, stood tall beside her, his arms crossed, eyes locked on Maya as though he had caught her trying to sneak into a private club. That look was familiar, too familiar. Maya's mind began to wander in the silence between keystrokes. How many times had she been here before? Not here exactly, not at a gate in an airport, but in that liminal space between being accepted and being doubted. The time in college when a professor questioned whether her essay was really her own. The night at a hotel when the concierge demanded 3 forms of ID before handing over a key card, though the couple beside her had needed only 1. The subtle interruptions in meetings, the side glances in boardrooms when she dared to speak with authority. She remembered her grandmother's voice again, soft but unwavering. Maya, they will test your patience in ways that feel designed to break you, but remember, you don't fight every battle with fire. Some you fight with ice. You let them see themselves unravel in your calm. Maya inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Rachel finally turned, her expression complicated. The system shows this ticket is valid. Seat 2A, no duplicates, no errors. Her voice was quiet, but clear. She glanced at Thomas, waiting for him to respond. Thomas shook his head, his jaw flexing. I've seen this happen before. Sometimes the system glitches. We need to protect the seat until it's confirmed beyond doubt. Beyond doubt, Maya repeated, her tone calm but cutting. You already have confirmation. Twice. The boy with the phone, Jordan, shifted slightly closer, angling the camera. Maya noticed it from the corner of her eye. She didn't mind. Maybe this moment needed witnesses. Maybe the world needed to see what dignity looked like when it was being tested. Thomas pressed on, ignoring the subtle tension rising in the room. I'm going to need you to wait here until we sort this. Please stand aside. The word struck like a command. Maya felt a sting in her chest, but she stood her ground. I am already standing aside, she replied evenly. But I will not be moved out of this conversation. If there's a problem with the ticket, say it clearly. If not, I will return to my seat. The air between them grew taut. Rachel looked as if she wanted to disappear. From behind, a voice spoke. It was the elderly woman, Gloria Bennett, who had followed off the plane with deliberate slowness. Her voice was soft, yet carried with surprising clarity. She's right, Gloria said. The young lady has the pass. You've checked it. Twice. The only thing left to check is yourselves. The words hung heavy, unexpected. A ripple of discomfort ran through the small crowd that had gathered near the gate. Thomas turned, flustered, but Gloria had already folded her hands over her cane, her gaze steady. She didn't say another word. She didn't have to. Maya felt a flicker of warmth in her chest, gratitude swelling for this stranger's courage. Still, she knew it wasn't enough. The system would resist. The people who guarded it would cling to their assumptions. Rachel cleared her throat. Maybe we should escalate this. Call operations. Just to be safe. Safe. The word stung. Safe for whom, Maya wondered. For the airline. To cover itself. For the passengers. To avoid a scene. Certainly not safe for her dignity, which was being eroded moment by moment under the gaze of strangers. But she didn't let that bitterness slip into her voice. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Call whoever you need. I'll wait. But I want it documented. Every step, every reason, every name attached." Her words carried a new weight. Not anger, but precision. A kind of threat hidden in civility. Rachel hesitated, then reached for the phone. As she spoke quietly to someone on the other end, Thomas leaned closer to Maya, lowering his voice. "You know, you could make this easier for yourself. Take a seat in economy for now, and we'll fix it later. No need to make a scene." Maya met his eyes, her own steady and unblinking. "The scene isn't mine. It's yours." For the first time, Thomas faltered, his mouth tightening, but no words coming. Minutes dragged by as Rachel continued her hushed conversation. Maya shifted slightly, rolling her shoulders back, letting her posture speak what her words did not. "I am not leaving." Around her, whispers rippled. Some passengers muttered about delays. Others murmured sympathy. Jordan's phone never wavered, capturing everything. Gloria stood silent but immovable, her presence alone a quiet shield. Finally, Rachel hung up the phone. She looked pale, conflicted. "They confirmed again," she said slowly. "The ticket is valid. There's no issue." Thomas opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "They also said the flight needs to depart. We can't keep holding." Silence fell. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Maya extended her hand calmly. "My pass. Please." Rachel placed it in her palm. Their eyes met briefly. There was apology there, but also fear. Maya turned back toward the plane. She walked with deliberate calm, every step measured. The whispers followed. But so did something else, a shift in the air, an unease not just with her presence, but with the treatment they had all witnessed. When she stepped back into the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was different. Passengers who had once looked away now looked directly at her, some with curiosity, some with shame, a few with respect. She sat once again in 2A. She smoothed her blazer, fastened the belt, and stared out at the rain streaking the window. Inside, though, the battle was far from over. She could feel it. This wasn't finished, not by a long shot. And though her face was calm, her mind was alive with conflict. Part of her wanted to scream, to unleash years of stored outrage. Another part whispered patience. Her grandmother's voice again, like an anchor. "You win by staying whole when they try to tear you apart." She closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. The flight hadn't even left the ground, and already the skies inside were storming. The seatbelt sign was still off, and passengers were still arranging themselves. When Thomas Green returned to the first-class cabin, his expression had hardened into something both professional and personal, as though this situation had shifted from an error to a challenge to his authority. Maya had just settled her breathing, her eyes fixed on the runway lights blurred by rain. But when she sensed him standing near, she turned, meeting his gaze directly. She expected tension. What she did not expect was the audacity of his next words. "Miss Ellison," he said, his voice clipped, "I've spoken again with the gate, and though they've confirmed your boarding pass, we still have an internal conflict with seat assignments. Another passenger is ticketed for 2A. We'll need you to move to economy until we sort this in the system." There was a hush in the cabin. The businessman who had been typing emails paused mid-keystroke. The mother with the toddler stopped humming her lullaby. Conversations that had filled the space only moments before fell away, leaving a silence that thickened around them. Maya's pulse quickened, but she held his eyes. "My pass has been scanned 3 times now. The system confirms it's mine." Thomas didn't blink. "That may be, But until this conflict is resolved, you cannot remain here. It's policy." Maya felt the old weight pressing against her chest again. She knew this game. Policy was the word people used to give prejudice the armor of legitimacy. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, stood, and faced him. "Then let me speak to the captain." Thomas frowned. "That won't be necessary." "It is necessary," she replied softly, but her tone carried iron. "You are trying to remove me from a seat I paid for, one that's been validated repeatedly. If you're going to escalate, then escalate fully. Bring Captain Harris here, now." Passengers exchanged glances. A low murmur spread. The teenager, Jordan Alvarez, raised his phone again, his hand steady despite the growing tension. Thomas hesitated, clearly unnerved by her insistence, but before he could respond, a new voice joined the standoff. "Is there a problem here?" Captain Harris appeared from the cockpit door, his uniform crisp, his presence commanding but calm. He had the kind of bearing that silenced a room simply by arriving. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp, scanning the scene with practiced authority. Thomas straightened. "Captain, we've got a duplicate seat assignment. I've asked this passenger to move until we resolve it." Captain Harris turned to Maya. "May I see your pass?" Without a word, Maya handed it over. He studied it, his brows furrowing slightly, then turned back to Thomas. "This is valid," the captain said. His tone carried no uncertainty. "Seat 2A. She's clear to remain." The relief that flickered through Maya's chest was brief, because Thomas, instead of accepting the verdict, leaned in stubbornly. "Captain, with all respect, I still believe, with all respect." Captain Harris cut him off firmly. "There's no conflict here. The only conflict is that you are questioning a valid ticket. That ends now." For a moment, Thomas's jaw clenched, his face flushing. Then he stepped back, stiff, but his eyes locked on Maya with something more than irritation. It was resentment. Maya sat again, her composure intact, but inside she wrestled with her thoughts. She had won this small round, but the sting of humiliation still clung to her. She hated that this victory even required a captain's intervention. She hated the familiar ache of being doubted, not because of error, but because of who she was. The businessman behind her leaned forward slightly. "Good for you," he murmured. His voice was quiet, almost reluctant, but it was something. The mother with the toddler gave her a small nod, the kind of silent solidarity that passed between strangers in moments of truth. Still, Thomas did not retreat entirely. Instead, he resumed pacing the aisle, his movements sharp, his posture tense. It was clear he was not finished. Minutes passed. The rain outside softened, but the storm inside the cabin only thickened. Then, without warning, Thomas returned, this time with another attendant. His tone was louder now, projecting authority not only to Maya, but to everyone listening. "Miss Ellison," he said, "please gather your belongings. We are asking you to deplane until this matter is fully investigated." Gasps broke through the cabin. Gloria Bennett, seated nearby, straightened with visible outrage. "This is absurd," she said, her voice carrying. "She has every right to be here." Thomas ignored her. His eyes were locked on Maya, waiting for compliance, expecting surrender. Maya's chest tightened, her heart pounding. She felt the weight of 100 battles pressing in. Not just hers, but her grandmother's, her mother's, the generations before her who had sat in rooms where they were told they didn't belong. She could feel their voices in her blood, pushing her to stand. She rose slowly, her hand calm even as her pulse raced. She gathered her bag, every movement deliberate, every step carrying the dignity they wanted to strip away. But inside, her thoughts churned. Should she comply quietly, document everything, and fight later? Or should she refuse here, now, forcing the truth to reveal itself in front of every witness? Her grandmother's words echoed again. Sometimes you let them push, because the further they push, the clearer they show the world who they are. So she allowed herself to be escorted down the aisle, though every fiber of her body resisted. She felt the eyes of passengers burning into her back, some pitying, some judgmental, some quietly enraged. When she reached the threshold of the plane, she turned, meeting Gloria's gaze. The older woman gave her the faintest nod, as though to say, "Hold steady." Outside at the gate again, the fluorescent lights hummed as Rachel Kim looked up with dismay. Again she whispered, her voice laced with guilt. Thomas spoke curtly. "Reconfirm this. Now." Rachel hesitated, then scanned the ticket yet again. The beep sounded, clear and sharp. The screen flashed green. Her eyes widened. "It's valid," she said, louder this time, as though daring Thomas to argue. "There's no conflict. Seat 2A belongs to Maya Ellison." The silence that followed was heavy, a silence that carried shame. Passengers crowded near the gate could hear it. Jordan's camera captured it. Gloria's sharp eyes confirmed it. Maya stood tall, her voice steady but cutting through the tension like glass. "3 times you've tried to remove me from what is mine. 3 times you've been proven wrong. This isn't about a seat anymore. It never was." Thomas's face flushed deeper, his composure unraveling. Rachel looked stricken, caught between fear of her colleague and the truth glaring on the screen. Maya stepped closer, her presence calm but unyielding. "Document this," she said. "Every scan, every attempt, every name, because this moment is not going to disappear." Rachel nodded faintly, her fingers trembling on the keyboard. Maya turned back toward the plane. Her stride was steady, her eyes fixed ahead, but inside, a storm raged. Part of her longed to lash out, to demand apology and accountability now. Another part told her the moment for that revelation had not yet come. As she stepped back into the cabin, silence fell again. She returned to her seat, buckled in, and folded her hands, outwardly calm, inwardly burning. This was no longer a matter of a ticket or a seat. This was becoming a reckoning. And Maya knew the storm had only just begun. The cabin door closed with a heavy thud that seemed louder than usual. The sound echoed in the silence that had fallen across the plane. Passengers had witnessed more than a boarding dispute. They had seen something raw, uncomfortable, undeniable. Even those who had tried to look away could no longer pretend this was routine. Maya sat in 2A again, her body composed, but her mind in turmoil. She kept her eyes on the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Every now and then, one drop would cling to the pane, trembling, before it gave way and slid into the others. She felt like that drop, trembling but refusing to break too soon. A few rows back, Gloria Bennett studied her. Gloria's gray curls framed her weathered face, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. She had lived long enough to know when silence was dangerous. She had seen these moments before, in different shapes, across different decades. She remembered sitting at a diner counter in the 1960s, being told her kind didn't belong there. She remembered walking through neighborhoods where stairs followed her every step. And now, here she was, half a century later, watching a young woman endure a version of the same cruelty. Gloria leaned slightly toward the passenger beside her, a middle-aged man reading a newspaper. "You see what just happened?" she whispered. The man shifted uncomfortably. Maybe it was just a mistake. Gloria's lips tightened. 3 times. He said nothing more, burying himself back in the rustle of paper, but his ears burned red. In the back of the cabin, Jordan Alvarez's phone was still recording. His friends were already lighting up the live feed with comments. "What's going on, bro? Is this for real? That's so messed up." His heart raced, half from the thrill of being in the middle of something that might go viral, half from the discomfort of watching a stranger treated unfairly. He zoomed in slightly, catching the quiet defiance in Maya's posture. Even sitting still, she radiated a kind of strength that unsettled him. He had never seen someone hold their ground so silently, so fiercely. Jordan whispered into his phone for the live stream. They kicked her off 3 times, and she had the right ticket. Like, it's crazy. She's back now. But you can feel it, like everyone's waiting for something to explode. His viewers were multiplying by the second. He didn't realize it yet, but the clip would spread far beyond his circle before the night ended. Meanwhile, Maya's inner struggle deepened. She kept hearing her grandmother's words, urging patience, urging strength. But part of her wanted to defy that wisdom. Part of her wanted to stand, to confront Thomas openly in front of everyone, to demand not just her seat, but her dignity acknowledged aloud. She clenched her hands in her lap, reminding herself that her silence was not surrender. It was strategy. Thomas moved stiffly through the aisle, his smile gone, his gestures robotic. He handed drinks to passengers who accepted them with forced politeness. Nobody wanted to engage him now. The weight of what they had seen lingered in the air, thick and unspoken. When he reached Gloria's row, she looked him directly in the eyes. "You owe that young woman an apology," she said, not loudly, but with a voice that cut. Thomas stiffened. "Ma'am, please enjoy your beverage." "I asked for no beverage," Gloria replied. "What I asked for is human decency." He moved on, his steps quicker, his shoulders rigid. The tension seemed to hang over everyone. The couple in row 4 whispered about whether they should file a complaint. The businessman tapped his phone, searching for the airline's customer service contact. Even the toddler sensed the energy, clinging quietly to his mother without fuss. Back in her seat, Maya inhaled slowly, letting the oxygen fill her lungs, steadying her heartbeat. She thought of Maya Ellison, her grandmother, and the way she had carried herself through decades of boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her. She thought of the nights she had spent listening to Vivian tell stories of survival, of strength. "They will look at you and expect less," Vivian had once told her. "You will feel the weight of their doubt, but do not waste energy proving yourself to them. Use that energy to prepare yourself for what comes next." Maya closed her eyes briefly. What was coming next? She could feel it building, like the storm outside the windows. The plane hadn't even left the ground yet, but the flight was already charged with something electric, something no one could ignore, as if on cue. Rachel Kim stepped quietly into the cabin. She didn't usually leave the gate once boarding was done, but the guilt had weighed too heavily on her. She approached Maya hesitantly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Miss Ellison," she began softly. Maya looked up, her expression calm but guarded. "Yes." Rachel swallowed hard. I just wanted to say that the system was clear. Your ticket was always valid. There was never any duplicate. I should have said it louder. I should have defended you sooner. I'm sorry." For the first time since boarding, Maya felt a flicker of something warm. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. She nodded. "Thank you for telling me." Rachel glanced around nervously, aware of Thomas's glare from across the cabin, then slipped back toward the front. Her shoulders tense. The apology, quiet as it was, shifted something among the passengers. The couple in row 4 stopped whispering and instead stared openly at Thomas. The businessman muttered under his breath, "Unbelievable." Even Jordan's live feed began filling with comments calling for accountability. The witnesses were no longer just passive observers. They were becoming a chorus, a presence that could not be ignored. Gloria leaned forward again, this time addressing Maya directly. "You carry yourself well, child. Don't let them see your spirit crack. They want that. Don't give it to them." Maya turned, meeting the older woman's eyes. For the first time all evening, she allowed herself a small smile. "Thank you." It was a simple exchange, but it bolstered her. She wasn't alone in this cabin, even if most remained silent. Some voices were rising, and that gave her strength. Thomas returned once more. His voice clipped, announcing that the flight would depart shortly, but his authority no longer filled the room. It was thinner now, fraying under the weight of the truth too many had seen. As the engines hummed to life, the cabin vibrated softly. Maya pressed her head back against the seat, her eyes drifting closed for a moment. She knew this story wasn't finished. The witnesses had seen too much, and what had begun as humiliation was slowly turning into something larger, something she could almost touch, but not yet name. The engines roared louder, vibrating beneath the cabin floor. Passengers adjusted their seats, stowed their devices, and braced themselves for takeoff. Yet beneath the surface of routine, an uneasy current ran through the air. It was not just the storm outside, or the delay that had stretched everyone's patience thin. It was the lingering injustice that had unfolded before their eyes. Maya sat in 2A, her body upright, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Outwardly, she was the picture of composure. Inwardly, she wrestled with herself. Her grandmother's voice urged calm. Her own heart demanded defiance. The two impulses collided inside her chest, leaving her both exhausted and sharpened, like steel tempered in fire. She felt Thomas's presence before she saw him. His steps carried a rhythm of irritation as he approached again, his clipboard in hand, his jaw set tight. He stopped beside her row, his shadow falling over her. "Miss Ellison," he began, his voice clipped and official. "I'm afraid we cannot proceed with you seated here. For operational reasons, you will need to relocate to the rear cabin." A hush spread through the passengers. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Everyone knew what this was. They had seen the ticket scanned. They had heard the captain's confirmation. This was not policy. This was persistence, sharpened into cruelty. Maya looked up at him, her eyes calm but piercing. "Operational reasons," she repeated softly, "or personal reasons?" Thomas's lips tightened. "This is not up for debate." Maya's chest rose slowly as she inhaled. Her voice, when it came, was clear, deliberate, carrying through the cabin. "It is very much up for debate when you are asking me to surrender a seat that is mine, verified by your own captain. This is not procedure. This is harassment." Gasps and murmurs filled the air. Gloria Bennett leaned forward in her seat, her cane pressed firmly to the floor. "She's right," she declared. "This is harassment, plain and simple." Jordan Alvarez's phone captured every second, his live stream audience swelling into the thousands. Comments flew across his screen, furious, demanding answers, calling out the injustice. He swallowed hard, realizing this was no longer just a recording for friends. This was becoming something far larger. Thomas's face flushed red. He leaned closer to Maya, lowering his voice though the venom in it was audible. "If you do not comply, I will have security escort you off this plane." Maya's heart pounded. She felt the pull of fear, the cold edge of humiliation pressing in. But she also felt the weight of every witness, every gaze locked on her. This was no longer just her fight. This was a stage, and though she had not chosen it, she could not walk away from it. Her inner voice wavered. Do you comply and fight later, with quiet documents and formal complaints, or do you resist now, with every risk that carries her grandmother's wisdom flickered through her memory? There comes a moment when silence is complicity. You will know that moment when it arrives. Maya rose slowly, her movements deliberate. The cabin watched, breathless. She stood in the narrow aisle, her eyes locked on Thomas's. "I will not leave this plane," she said, her voice steady, resonant. "You can call security if you like. You can try to drag me out. But I will not move from what is rightfully mine. This seat is not just a number, it is my dignity, and I will not give it to you." The silence that followed was thunderous. Passengers shifted in their seats, some murmuring support, others simply stunned. Gloria clapped once, sharply, breaking the stillness. "Good girl," she said, her eyes blazing. Thomas straightened, his authority faltering. He looked toward the cockpit, as though searching for backup. But Captain Harris had already stepped into the aisle, his expression stern. "Enough," the captain said, his voice deep and commanding. "Miss Ellison's ticket is valid. She is staying in her seat. If there is an issue, it is not with her." For a moment, it seemed the confrontation might dissolve, but Thomas, his pride bruised beyond reason, pushed further. "Captain, with all respect, if she refuses to comply, she's a security risk." A ripple of shock passed through the passengers. A security risk. The words were heavy, dangerous. They carried implications far beyond seating disputes. Maya felt a chill run through her spine. She had seen what that label could do. She had seen lives derailed, reputations destroyed, opportunities erased by that single accusation. For a split second, fear gripped her, icy and suffocating. But then, like a flame igniting, something else rose within her. Anger. Not reckless anger, but righteous, steady, anchored in truth. She turned to the cabin, her voice lifting, strong enough for all to hear. "Do you see what's happening here? I bought my ticket. I followed every rule. My seat has been verified over and over again. And still, I am being asked to move. Still, I am being labeled a problem, a risk. Not because of policy, not because of error, but because I refused to disappear quietly." The cabin stirred, alive with murmurs, with shifting energy. A woman in row 5 spoke up. "She's right. We all saw it." A man across the aisle added, "This isn't policy. This is discrimination." Voices began to rise, overlapping, emboldened by each other. The chorus grew louder, sharper, undeniable. Thomas's composure cracked. His face was flushed, his hands trembling as he tried to hold on to authority slipping rapidly from his grip. He looked again to the captain, but Harris's eyes were hard, unyielding. "We are not removing this passenger," the captain declared. "And if anyone has an issue with that, They may disembark voluntarily. Applause erupted. It was not everyone, but enough to break the atmosphere of fear, enough to signal solidarity. Maya stood tall, her heart racing, but her face calm. She returned to her seat slowly, deliberately, her movements carrying the dignity of someone who had refused to bow. She buckled her belt, folded her hands, and looked out at the runway lights. But inside, the storm still raged. Her thoughts tumbled over each other. Relief, fear, pride, exhaustion. She had stood her ground, but she knew this was not over. The damage was done, the humiliation endured. And yet, something else had been planted too. A spark, a truth witnessed, a story that would not be silenced. As the engines roared and the plane finally began to move, Maya closed her eyes briefly. Her grandmother's voice echoed again, this time with a different weight. Strength is not in never being broken. Strength is in choosing how to stand when they try to break you. She had chosen, and now the world was watching. The plane rumbled down the runway, the engines howling as it lifted into the storm-darkened sky. Rain streaked across the windows like ribbons of silver, then fell away as the aircraft climbed above the clouds. Inside the cabin, the lights dimmed, casting a soft glow over passengers who sat in silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Maya sat upright in her seat, the seat belt snug across her lap. Her gaze remained fixed on the oval window, though she saw nothing but her own reflection mirrored in the glass. Her face was calm, composed, but her chest was still tight with the weight of what had happened. She replayed each moment in her mind, the way Thomas had spoken to her, the way the gate agent hesitated, the sting of being asked to move again and again despite the evidence in her hands. She pressed her palms together, resting them against her lap, and whispered inwardly to herself, "Do not unravel now. Hold steady. The battle is not finished." Around her, the cabin shifted back into its usual rhythm. Drinks were served. Passengers reclined their seats. Conversations, tentative at first, began again. Yet the normalcy felt brittle, fragile, as though one wrong word could shatter it all over again. In row 3, Gloria Bennett adjusted her glasses and leaned toward the businessman who had stayed silent earlier. "You saw what happened," she said firmly. "Don't pretend it was anything less than what it was." The man sighed, lowering his newspaper. His voice was low, defensive. "I don't want to get involved. These things, they always get complicated." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "It is only complicated because people like you let it be. Silence is what keeps injustice alive." The businessman said nothing more, but he didn't raise the paper again. He stared at the seat back in front of him, his jaw tight, his conscience pricked. Further back, Jordan Alvarez whispered to his phone, still live streaming under the blanket of the low cabin lights. "Yo, this is wild. People are going crazy in the comments. They're saying they're going to tag news outlets, lawyers, everybody. This is about to blow up." His voice trembled with both excitement and unease. He looked toward Maya's row, zooming in on her calm figure. "She hasn't said a word since takeoff. She looks like she's carrying the whole weight of the world on her shoulders." Maya could feel the weight of eyes, cameras, and unspoken judgments pressing in. She closed her eyes briefly, retreating inward. Her grandmother's voice filled the silence of her mind. "They will try to make you small, but you must carry yourself as if you are already larger than their world, because you are." The memory of Vivian Ellison brought both strength and sorrow. Maya wished her grandmother was beside her now. her hand steady, her wisdom grounding. But she was alone, except for the strangers around her, witnesses who were both her shield and her audience. Her thoughts tangled with doubt. Did I do the right thing? Should I have kept quiet, moved, avoided the confrontation? What if this follows me forever? What if it hurts more than it helps? Then another thought broke through, sharp and steady. No, you did not create this moment. You did not invite this injustice. You only refused to surrender to it. The cart rattled down the aisle, the faint clink of bottles breaking the quiet. Thomas passed by again, his expression tight, his gestures mechanical. He avoided her gaze, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed his unease. He served drinks, smiled stiffly, and moved on. When he reached Gloria's row, she looked him squarely in the eyes. "You know what you did," she said in a voice just loud enough for him to hear. "And so does everyone else here." Thomas froze for a fraction of a second before forcing a tight smile. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am." He pushed the cart onward, faster now, eager to escape her gaze. Maya watched the exchange silently, her pulse steadying. She was not alone in this fight. The witnesses were becoming more than bystanders. They were becoming voices. Captain Harris made a quiet pass through the cabin as well, his presence calm, his expression unreadable. When he reached Maya's row, he stopped briefly, his hand resting lightly on the back of a seat. "You're safe here," he said softly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "I won't let this escalate further." Maya met his eyes and nodded once. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they carried her gratitude. For all his professionalism, she could see in his expression that he understood the gravity of what had unfolded. Hours stretched slowly as the plane soared through the night sky. Maya tried to rest, but her mind remained restless. Images of her grandmother's stories replayed in fragments the marches, the protests, the quiet defiance at boardroom tables where Vivian's voice had been the only one like hers. She remembered one story in particular, told on a rainy night, not unlike this one. Vivian had been denied entry to a hotel ballroom where she was scheduled to speak, told instead to use the service entrance. She had refused, standing in the lobby until allies arrived, until the organizers had no choice but to open the doors. "They will test your dignity," Vivian had told her that night. And sometimes the greatest test is not the victory, but the waiting that follows. The silence afterward. When you must carry what they tried to put upon you without letting it poison who you are. Maya breathed deeply, steadying herself with that memory. She would not let this moment poison her. She would carry it. Yes, but she would also shape it into something more. Nearby, Jordan whispered again into his phone. "She's just sitting there, calm as anything." People in the chat are saying she's an inspiration, like she's already some kind of symbol. I don't even think she knows how big this is getting. The truth was, Maya did know. Not the scale of it, not yet, but she could feel the weight of the story pressing outward, beyond the cabin walls, into the larger world. Gloria, sensing Maya's quiet turmoil, leaned slightly across the aisle. Her voice was gentle but strong. "Don't let them take your peace, child. You've shown them more strength than they ever expected. That's enough for tonight." Maya turned, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "Maybe," she said softly. The plane pierced through the last remnants of storm, emerging into clear skies where stars glittered across the black canvas of night. The cabin lights dimmed further, passengers settling into uneasy rest. Maya leaned her head against the window, her reflection staring back at her. She whispered inwardly to herself again, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." And as she drifted between wakefulness and sleep, she felt the strange certainty that the true storm was not behind her, but ahead. A storm of voices, of consequences, of truths finally rising. The plane had settled into the rhythm of long-haul flight, cruising high above the Atlantic. The cabin was hushed now, lit only by the dim glow of reading lamps and the soft flicker of seat-back screens. A few passengers slept with their heads tilted awkwardly, while others sipped quietly on wine or scrolled absent-mindedly through their phones. Maya Ellison remained awake. Her body leaned against the window, but her eyes stayed open, watching the faint reflection of her face shimmer against the black canvas of sky. She had not moved much since the confrontation. Her stillness was a shield, her silence a choice, yet her mind refused to rest. She thought of the word Thomas had used, security risk. It echoed inside her, sharp and dangerous. She knew the weight of those words, how easily they could be weaponized against her, how quickly they could erase nuance and turn dignity into suspicion. That label lingered in the air like smoke, invisible but suffocating. She closed her eyes briefly, remembering her grandmother Vivian's lessons again. The power they wield is not always in the action, Maya. Sometimes it is in the label. They will try to define you with words you did not choose. Do not let them stick. You must choose your own name, every time. Her breath steadied at that thought, but her chest still felt heavy, as if the pressure of the entire cabin pressed against her lungs. A sudden jolt shook the plane, rattling glasses and jolting sleeping passengers awake. The overhead bins creaked, a few items tumbling inside with muffled thuds. The seatbelt sign lit up with a sharp ding. The voice of Captain Harris came over the speakers, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're entering a patch of turbulence. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain seated until the sign is turned off." The plane shook again, harder this time. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through some passengers, while others gripped their armrests. The storm outside had not been left behind after all. It had followed them into the night sky. Thomas moved quickly down the aisle, securing loose trays and urging passengers to sit upright. His face was pale, but his tone carried forced calm. When he reached Maya's row, his eyes flickered toward her, filled with unspoken tension. For a brief moment, fear stripped away his authority. He was just another human clinging to control in the sky. Maya felt the tremor beneath her feet, but remained steady. She had endured worse storms in silence. She tightened her belt and folded her hands in her lap. The turbulence outside felt almost symbolic, as if the world itself was mirroring the unrest inside the cabin. Across the aisle, Gloria Bennett whispered a quiet prayer, her hands folded over her cane. Her eyes, though, remained sharp, glancing toward Maya with a look of solidarity, as if to say, "You are not alone, even in the storm." Jordan Alvarez fumbled with his phone, trying to keep recording despite the bumps that rattled his arm. His livestream audience had exploded, climbing into tens of thousands. Comments flew across the screen faster than he could read them. "She's a queen. Don't let them push you out. This needs to go viral. Name the airline." But even he grew quiet as the turbulence worsened. The plane dipped suddenly, sending a wave of gas through the cabin. A drink toppled in row 5, splashing across the tray. Someone muttered a prayer. Maya's mind, however, was not on the turbulence. It was on the way Thomas had looked at her, anger and fear blending in his eyes. She could almost feel him plotting, recalculating how to regain control. And that frightened her more than the shaking of the plane. Inside, she wrestled again with herself. Do you stay silent and endure, or do you confront him again? Strip his authority with the truth. Her grandmother's wisdom tugged at her, reminding her that timing mattered. Strength is not only in speaking, Maya. It is in choosing the moment when your voice will echo loudest. The plane jolted again, a sharp drop that sent hearts leaping into throats. Maya closed her eyes, her breathing steady, grounding herself in calm. Around her, panic whispered in gasps and muttered prayers, but she held on to her stillness. When the turbulence eased, a heavy silence followed. Passengers exhaled, some laughing nervously, others shaking their heads. The seatbelt sign remained lit, but the worst had passed. In that fragile quiet, Gloria leaned toward Maya, her voice low but firm. You see how quickly fear exposes them. That man hides behind authority, but the storm stripped it away. He's just a man, child. Don't let him make you smaller than you are. Maya nodded faintly, gratitude warming her chest. She turned back to the window, her reflection staring back with new steadiness, but the peace did not last. Thomas returned, his voice sharp as he addressed Maya directly, ignoring the passengers around them. Miss Ellison, I need to remind you again that your behavior earlier was disruptive. If there are further issues, this will be escalated once we land. Gas rippled, even in the aftermath of turbulence. The attack felt jarring, misplaced. A woman in row 4 spoke up angrily. Are you serious? She hasn't moved. She hasn't said a word since takeoff. Another passenger chimed in. She's the calmest one here. Why don't you leave her alone? Thomas flushed but pressed on. I am responsible for the safety of this cabin. That includes addressing disruptive behavior. Maya felt heat rise in her chest. Her patience was being stretched thin, but she forced herself to speak with precision, not rage. The only disruption here is the way you keep returning to me as if my presence itself is a problem. I have complied with every rule. I have remained in my seat. If that is disruption, then your definition says more about you than it does about me. The words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Gloria clapped softly once, murmuring, That's it, child. Jordan's live stream exploded with comments, cheering her words, demanding accountability, urging her to hold her ground. The chorus of witnesses was growing louder, more confident. Thomas's mouth opened, but no words came. His authority was crumbling piece by piece, and he knew it. He retreated quickly, moving down the aisle with stiff shoulders, his face pale with frustration. Maya exhaled slowly, her body sinking slightly into the seat. She knew this was far from over. There would be consequences when they landed. She could already feel the weight of that looming storm, but she also knew something had shifted. The witnesses had become participants. The silence had broken. The plane soared onward into the night, the turbulence fading, but the cabin still charged with tension. Maya closed her eyes again, listening inwardly to her grandmother's voice. Hold steady, child. The sky may shake, but you must not. And so she held steady, waiting for what would come next. The hum of the engine steadied as the plane cut smoothly through calmer skies. The turbulence had passed, but the cabin remained restless. Conversations flickered in hushed tones, some passengers whispering their outrage, others retreating into silence. The air was heavier than before. charged with an awareness that what had happened could no longer be ignored. Maya sat still, her body rigid, her gaze on the dark horizon beyond the window. Inside, her thoughts pulsed with conflict. She had spoken with strength, and the passengers had begun to rally. Yet with every word she uttered, the stakes grew higher. She knew Thomas would not stop. He had made her the center of his authority, and to admit fault now would unravel him completely. The danger of retaliation loomed over her like a shadow. Her grandmother's voice returned in memory, gentle but firm. "They will test you again and again, child. The question is not whether they will push. It is whether you will break." Maya clenched her hands together, steadying herself. She would not break. Thomas reappeared, moving down the aisle, with the stiff gait of a man who had lost control but refused to admit it. His smile was brittle, his tone falsely sweet as he addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience earlier. Safety is always our top priority, and we appreciate your cooperation." Several passengers exchanged incredulous glances. His words rang hollow, an attempt to reclaim authority without acknowledgement of what had truly unfolded. He stopped near Maya's row, his voice dropping just enough for her to hear. "This isn't over." Her chest tightened, but she kept her face neutral. She leaned slightly toward him, her voice soft but firm. "You're right. It isn't." He blinked, unsettled by her composure, before moving briskly on. Gloria Bennett leaned closer across the aisle, her eyes sharp. "You stood your ground beautifully. Dear, don't let him rattle you now. Bullies thrive on fear. When they see they can't shake you, that's when they lose." Maya offered a faint smile, grateful but weary. "I'm just so tired. Gloria." Gloria's hand rested lightly over her cane. "Tired is the cost of carrying truth, but it is a worthy burden." Further back, Jordan Alvarez whispered urgently to his phone. "This thing has gone crazy. News outlets are picking it up. People are tagging the airline nonstop. It's blowing up on Twitter. There are hashtags already." His voice trembled, torn between awe and anxiety. "She doesn't even know yet. She's just sitting there, like nothing's happening." Maya shifted in her seat, feeling the weight of invisible eyes beyond the cabin. Eyes she had not invited, but that were now following her every move. A part of her recoiled at the thought of becoming a symbol, stripped of her individuality. Another part of her understood the power of it. Stories like this had toppled careers, had sparked movements, and yet, she wondered quietly to herself, will they see me, or only the story they want to tell? The cabin's uneasy quiet was broken by a man in row 4, his voice clear, cutting through the silence. "I think we should say something. All of us." Heads turned toward him, some curious, some hesitant. He gestured toward Maya. "We all saw what happened. We can't just let it disappear. If we don't speak, then we're complicit." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Silence was easy. Solidarity was not. A woman across the aisle frowned. "I just don't want to get involved. Things like this get messy." Gloria's voice rose. "Stronger now. Messy is not an excuse for silence. Messy is where justice begins." The teenager Jordan raised his phone slightly. "You don't have to go public if you're scared. But even if you just say it here, even if you just acknowledge it, it matters." Maya listened, her chest swelling with something she could not name. It was not relief, not victory, but the fragile beginnings of something larger. A chorus, faint but growing, voices deciding whether to remain hidden or to step forward. Thomas returned again, his movements sharper, less composed. He carried a notepad, scribbling hastily as he moved. He paused at Maya's row, holding the pad against his chest. For the record, Miss Ellison, your conduct will be reported. Gas filled the air. Gloria slammed her cane against the floor. This is outrageous. Her conduct. She has been nothing but dignified, while you have harassed her endlessly. The man from row 4 added, if you write her up, you'll have to write all of us too, because we're witnesses, and we'll speak. Others murmured agreement, voices overlapping, courage building in the chorus. Thomas's face tightened, his control slipping further. He turned quickly and stormed down the aisle, his notepad trembling in his hand. Maya exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. Her mind wrestled with fear and resolve. If they write me up, if they mark me as disruptive, what then? What doors will close? What jobs? What futures? She pressed her palms against her lap, grounding herself. You cannot let fear dictate the terms of your dignity. Captain Harris emerged from the cockpit again, his voice calm but resolute. That's enough, he said, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. Miss Ellison has done nothing wrong. This matter will not be escalated further on this flight. His words settled over the cabin like a shield. Passengers exhaled, some clapping softly, others nodding in approval. The tension loosened, if only slightly. Maya turned toward him, her voice low but steady. Thank you, Captain. He gave her a small nod, his eyes conveying more than his words. Then he returned to the cockpit, leaving behind an atmosphere that was still heavy but steadier than before. Maya leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes briefly. The exhaustion pressed against her bones, but beneath it, something stronger stirred. She had not been broken. She had not been silenced. And now, others were beginning to rise with her. The dividing line had been drawn. On one side stood silence, complicity, fear. On the other stood dignity, solidarity, truth. And though the line was thin and fragile, Maya knew she had chosen her side. She opened her eyes, gazing out at the stars scattered across the endless black sky. Somewhere far below, the ocean stretched vast and unknowable. But up here, in this fragile tube of light and steel, a different kind of storm was forming. Maya whispered inwardly, almost like a prayer. Let this matter. Let this not be forgotten. And as the plane carried them forward into the night, she felt the faint but steady thrum of something larger than herself beginning to take shape. The steady hum of the engines filled the cabin, but beneath that sound, there was a pulse, a nervous thrum of energy. The air was charged, restless. Passengers shifted in their seats, whispering to each other, eyes darting between Maya and the flight attendant who had made her a target. Maya sat motionless, her back straight, her hands resting in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on the window, but she saw little beyond the glass. The stars outside glittered faintly, eternal and distant, as though mocking the turmoil contained inside this fragile plane, inside her chest. Her heart pounded with quiet force. She could feel the edges of her patience fraying. Every word Thomas had spoken, every insinuation he had made, echoed inside her like a drumbeat. Disruptive, security risk, conduct, words that could follow her, shadow her, crush opportunities before they were even offered. She knew their power, and she feared them, even as she resisted. Her grandmother's words came back again, heavy and steady. The world will demand your silence, child. and punish you when you give it. So speak anyway. Speak, even when your voice trembles, especially then." Her throat tightened. She pressed her palms against her lap, fighting the urge to cry. "No, not here. Not in front of them." At the back of the cabin, Thomas Green stood rigid, his face pale, his jaw set. He scribbled furiously into his notepad, the paper crinkling under his pen. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. He had lost control of the passengers, lost control of the narrative, but he had not lost his stubborn determination. He was determined to make this woman a problem, even if it destroyed his own composure in the process. He marched down the aisle, his eyes blazing. The cabin quieted instantly, all conversation silenced by the weight of his footsteps. He stopped at Maya's row, his shadow falling across her. "Miss Ellison," he said sharply, his voice carrying across the cabin. "Stand up." Gas filled the air. Gloria Bennett sat forward, her cane gripped tightly. "This is harassment," she exclaimed. "She has done nothing wrong." Maya looked up slowly, her expression calm, but her chest tight with anger. Why Thomas's voice rose, tinged with desperation. "You have refused to comply with repeated instructions. You are interfering with the safe operation of this flight. I am asking you to stand up so that we can resolve this once and for all." A man in row 4 slammed his hand against the armrest. "This is absurd. She has complied with everything. She hasn't moved from her seat. We all saw it." Another passenger joined in, her voice trembling but strong. "You're targeting her. Everyone knows it." The murmurs spread quickly, passengers voicing agreement, their frustration breaking through the thin barrier of politeness that had restrained them before. The cabin was no longer silent. It was alive with voices, echoing against the narrow walls. Jordan Alvarez raised his phone higher, his live stream capturing every moment. "Y'all, it's happening again," he whispered into the mic. "But people are standing up now. Look at this." Thomas's face flushed deep red. His authority was collapsing in real time, shredded by the chorus of voices rising against him. Yet he pressed forward, his pride refusing to surrender. "Miss Ellison, if you do not comply, I will be forced to take further action when we land." Maya's chest tightened. She could feel dozens of eyes pressing on her, waiting to see what she would do. Her breath came steady, controlled, but inside her thoughts wrestled with fury and fear. If I stand, I give him power. If I stay seated, he calls it defiance. Either way, he writes me into his story. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind again. "Write your own story. Maya, let no one else hold the pen." She inhaled deeply, the oxygen filling her lungs like fire. She turned her gaze to Thomas, her voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the cabin noise. "I am seated in my assigned place. I have complied with every instruction. I will not stand just to satisfy your need for control. If you want to escalate, then let it be on record that you harassed a paying passenger who followed every rule." The cabin erupted in murmurs, passengers nodding, some clapping softly in agreement. Gloria lifted her chin proudly, her eyes glistening. "That's right, child. Hold your ground." Thomas froze, his pen trembling against his notepad. His lips parted, but no words came. The weight of the witnesses pressed against him, their voices a collective wall he could no longer push through. He turned sharply, retreating down the aisle, his notepad clutched like a weapon he no longer knew how to wield. Captain Harris appeared moments later, his presence calm but firm. His eyes scanned the cabin, landing on Maya with a quiet nod before turning to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight will continue smoothly from here. There will be no further disruptions." His gaze lingered on Thomas, whose shoulders stiffened under the weight of silent reprimand. The captain's words settled over the cabin like a balm. Passengers exhaled, the tension easing slightly, but the energy remained, buzzing beneath the surface. The line had been crossed, the boiling point reached. Nothing about this flight was ordinary anymore. Maya leaned back in her seat, her body trembling with adrenaline she refused to show. Her hands shook faintly against her lap, and she clenched them into fists to still the tremor. Inside, her emotions warred relief, anger, exhaustion, fear. She wanted to scream, to cry, to vanish, but instead, she sat tall, her composure her last defense. Gloria leaned across the aisle, her voice tender now. "You did well, dear. Don't doubt it. You held your ground when it mattered most." Maya turned toward her lips curving into a faint smile. "I just want it to be over." Gloria's eyes softened. "It will be, but not tonight. Tonight you lit a fire. Fires don't die quickly. They spread." Jordan whispered again into his phone, his voice filled with awe. "This is history. Guys, she didn't flinch. She didn't back down. Remember her name, Maya Ellison?" Maya closed her eyes briefly, the sound of her name echoing in her mind. It frightened her, the thought of becoming a symbol, of being remembered for this moment rather than for who she was, but it also gave her strength. For the first time since the confrontation began, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps this ordeal could become something more, something larger than humiliation, something larger than fear. As the plane soared into the night, Maya whispered inwardly, steady and quiet, "I will not break. I will not be erased." And though the storm inside her still raged, she knew one truth with absolute certainty she had not lost. The cabin had quieted again, but the silence was different now. It was not the heavy silence of fear or tension. It was the silence that followed thunder, a silence charged with the knowledge that something irreversible had happened. Maya sat rigid, her shoulders aching from holding herself upright for so long. Every muscle in her body begged her to collapse, to let herself sink into the seat. But she could not yet. She felt eyes on her, not hostile, but curious, supportive, even reverent. That awareness weighed on her almost as much as Thomas's accusations had. She was not invisible anymore. She was a symbol, whether she wanted it or not. Her mind drifted inward, replaying the confrontation in fragments. Thomas's voice demanding she stand, the passengers' voices rising in protest, her own words, sharp and steady despite the storm inside her, and her grandmother's voice weaving through it all, reminding her of dignity, of the power of choosing her moment. Vivian Ellison had always told her that strength was not loud. It was not violence. It was endurance. It was the ability to remain unbroken, even when the world pushed hardest. Tonight, Maya had tried to live that lesson. Yet as she sat there trembling, her body drained, she wondered if her grandmother had ever felt this same weariness. Gloria Bennett broke the silence, her voice carrying through the quiet cabin. "You all saw it. Every one of you. She did nothing wrong." Her cane tapped the floor for emphasis. "When we land, I'll be the first to speak to whoever needs to hear it. I've kept quiet too many times in my life. Not anymore." A murmur of agreement passed through the rows. Heads nodded. Some passengers clapped softly, hesitant at first, but then firmer. Their voices rose not in argument this time, but in solidarity. It was a small chorus, but it grew with every word. Maya turned slightly, her eyes meeting Gloria's. The older woman's gaze was steady, unwavering, a lifeline in the shifting storm. "Thank you," Maya whispered, her voice cracking with fatigue. Gloria's lips curved into a faint smile. "Don't thank me, child. Thank yourself. You gave us courage." Maya's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, surprised to see them trembling. She clasped them together, trying to still the shake. But the tremor persisted. It was not fear anymore. It was the release of everything she had held in. Jordan Alvarez's voice carried from a few rows back. "The internet's going crazy," he whispered into his phone, unaware that his words carried farther than he thought. Hashtags everywhere. News outlets picking it up in real time. They're calling her the calmest passenger in America. People are saying this flight is history. Maya's stomach twisted. The idea of strangers dissecting her every word, her every gesture, unsettled her. She had not chosen to be a spectacle. She had only chosen to hold her dignity. And yet, she understood now that dignity did not remain private. It rippled outward, touching lives she could not see. Thomas remained at the back of the cabin, his posture stiff, his face pale. He no longer moved down the aisle, no longer tried to reassert control. His notepad lay forgotten on the counter, his authority stripped bare. He had lost not just a confrontation, but the confidence of the cabin. Every glance that turned toward him carried judgment, quiet and damning. Captain Harris's presence lingered as a steady anchor. He had returned to the cockpit, but the echo of his authority remained. His intervention had changed the tide. For Maya, it had been the first moment she felt shielded, the first time someone in power had used their voice to protect rather than condemn. It mattered more than she could say. As the minutes stretched on, Maya's mind drifted again. She thought of her grandmother, of late-night talks on the porch, of Vivian's hands folded in her lap as she spoke of battles fought in boardrooms and airports and quiet corners where dignity had been tested. She thought of the quiet strength it must have taken to endure those decades, to build an empire while carrying the weight of prejudice at every step. Would Vivian be proud of her? Tonight, Maya wondered. Or would she say she should have done more? Spoken louder, pushed harder. That thought gnawed at her. The worry that perhaps dignity had not been enough. Gloria seemed to sense her doubt. She leaned closer, her voice low but firm. "Don't question yourself, dear. You did what needed to be done. You didn't fight with fists or screams. You fought with truth. That's what people will remember." Maya exhaled slowly, her chest loosening at those words. She turned to Gloria, her eyes glistening. "I was so afraid, not of him, but of what would follow me after. The labels, the consequences." Gloria's hand rested lightly on her arm. "Fear is natural, but courage is what you did in spite of it. That's the story. Maya, not the fear, the courage." Maya nodded faintly, her throat too tight to speak. She let the words settle inside her, like stones anchoring her in the storm. The cabin lights dimmed further, signaling the transition to night flight. Passengers settled back into their seats, some closing their eyes, others whispering quietly. But the atmosphere had shifted. There was no going back to the easy anonymity of before. Every person on that flight knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Maya finally allowed her body to relax, sinking slightly into the seat. Exhaustion washed over her, heavy and unrelenting, but beneath it lay something steadier, a quiet strength, not triumphant, but enduring. She had not sought this battle, but she had not run from it either. And that mattered. Jordan's phone buzzed again, a flood of notifications lighting up the screen. He read a few aloud to the passenger beside him, unable to contain his excitement. They're calling her a hero. People are saying she represents all of us who've been silent too long. It's everywhere now. Maya heard the words but did not respond. She closed her eyes, her grandmother's voice echoing once more. Endurance, child, not applause. Endure, and the world will catch up to you. The plane soared steadily through the night, the storm behind them now. But inside, Maya knew another storm awaited upon landing. Questions, cameras, consequences. She did not know what awaited her, but she knew one thing with certainty: she would face it standing tall. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to release some of the weight pressing against her chest. The worst of the storm had passed. What came next would be different, but she was ready. The silence of the cabin was not emptiness. It was the silence of witnesses who had chosen to see, who had chosen not to forget. And Maya, though weary to her bones, knew that was enough. For now. The first hint of morning touched the rim of the horizon as the plane began its descent. The cabin lights brightened slowly, a soft sunrise inside a silver tube. Seat backs clicked upright. Window shades slid open. The city below came into view as a scatter of lights, a quiet constellation stretching toward the lake. Maya Ellison pressed her palms together and breathed in, then out. Her body felt heavy, as if every moment of the flight had settled into her bones. Yet her eyes were clear. The storm inside had not vanished, but it had found its center. Captain Harris came over the intercom, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago. Local time is just past dawn. We will be taxiing in a moment. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened. A few rows back. Jordan Alvarez watched his phone light up with messages that stacked faster than he could read. The stream had multiplied during the night. Clips were already circulating beyond his feed, mirrored and stitched. Comment lines surging with anger and gratitude and something like hope. He glanced toward 2A and whispered to the camera, "She is still calm. We are on the ground. This is not over." Gloria Bennett touched the end of her cane to the carpet and leaned forward. Her eyes met Maya's. "You ready, child?" Maya gave a small nod. "Ready as a word. I am here." The plane rolled to the gate. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Normally the aisle would flood with people reaching for bags. Racing time. Not today. People stayed seated. Some turned their bodies toward Maya as if to form a quiet shield. Others simply watched, waiting to see who would move first. Thomas Green remained near the galley, pale and rigid. He adjusted a stack of service papers that no longer required adjusting. His mouth was set in a line so tight it looked like it hurt to hold. The door opened with a plush hiss. The jet bridge connected, the cabin filled with the faint smell of outside air, colder and cleaner than what they had been breathing for hours. An operations manager stepped into the doorway with a headset and a clipboard. His eyes scanned the cabin, landed on 2A, then shifted to Captain Harris. The captain nodded once. Maya stood, every movement deliberate. She took her bag from the overhead bin, squared its corners with an instinct for order, and turned toward the aisle. She felt the hush as a presence more than a sound. Gloria rose too, leaning on her cane. Jordan followed, still filming, though he lowered the phone when he reached the front row. At the threshold, Captain Harris stepped aside. "Miss Ellison," he said quietly, "I will walk with you." "Thank you," she replied. They entered the jet bridge together. The The metal floor hummed beneath their feet. At the end of the bridge, a small group waited. Rachel Kim stood with her hands clasped, eyes red but steady. Beside her was a woman in a navy suit with a badge that read Regional Director. A uniformed airport officer waited nearby, posture neutral, and at the counter phone, its speaker already glowing. A gate agent had pressed a button to hold a line open. Rachel spoke first. "Miss Ellison, I am sorry." The words were plain and bare, and her voice trembled on the last syllable. The system was clear. "I should have stood firmer. I did not. I am sorry." Maya held her gaze. "Thank you for saying it here, out loud." The woman in the navy suit stepped forward. "Miss Ellison, I am Dana Foster, Regional Director for the airline. The executive office is on the line. We would like to take this to a private room, out of the way." Maya set her bag beside the podium. "We started in public. We will finish in public. Your line can stay on speaker." Dana hesitated, then nodded to the agent. The speaker crackled. A calm voice filled the space. "Miss Ellison, this is the board liaison. We are listening." Maya stood straight. "Good. Then first, for the record, Seat 2A, ticket purchased in full, verified multiple times. Removal attempts recorded by passengers. Names involved include Thomas Green, cabin crew, and Rachel Kim at the gate. Who has acknowledged the error? Please confirm you are recording." "We are recording," the liaison said. There was a shift in the air around the gate, a sense that the ground beneath them had found a firmer place to stand. Passengers who had followed from the cabin formed a loose semicircle, quiet but present. Gloria stood with them, her cane planted like a small flag. Another voice entered the call, lower, composed, unmistakably in charge. Maya closed her eyes for a heartbeat, relief and resolve meeting in the same breath. "I am here, grandmother." A ripple moved through the group at the gate. The name traveled in whispers. Vivian Ellison, the founder, the chair, the woman whose face people knew from magazine covers and city murals, the woman who had built a company and then a constellation of companies, and who sat at the helm of the family office that held large stakes in everything from water to wind to wings. Vivian's voice was calm as stone, worn smooth by years of currents. "We have the incident log. We have seen the clips. Thank you for holding your ground. For now I want names, steps, and a full record, and I want the relevant clauses in the bylaws in front of every board member within 5 minutes." Dana wet her lip and glanced at her watch. "Yes, Ms. Ellison," she murmured, though her eyes stayed on Maya. Maya did not step away from the speaker. She looked at Thomas, who had stopped just inside the jet bridge. His hands were empty now. His eyes met hers for a second and dropped. "For the record," she said, "I request immediate suspension of Mr. Green from customer-facing duties pending investigation, and a documented acknowledgement, not a vague apology, that multiple verifications were ignored while I was repeatedly asked to move." Dana began to respond, but the speaker cut in with the board liaison, voice firmer. "Acknowledged. Effective immediately. Crew member Thomas Green is relieved of customer-facing duties pending review. Public acknowledgement will be drafted now. Legal will confirm wording with you before release." Rachel inhaled sharply. Thomas swayed almost imperceptibly, then steadied himself with a hand against the wall. Maya turned toward the witnesses. "This is not only about me. Anyone here who wishes to give a statement, please do. We will ensure your accounts are included." She looked at the gate agent. "Please open a record now." The officer stepped forward with a small notebook. her tone professional, but warmer than the night before. "I will take names and numbers. We will attach your statements to the incident." Gloria tapped her cane lightly. "Put me first," she said. Then she looked at Maya. "I have watched too many young women stand alone. Not today." Jordan lifted his phone slightly. "I have footage, full-time stamps. I am not deleting anything." Dana Foster signaled to a man in a suit who had just arrived at the edge of the group. He wore the look of someone who slept 4 hours in a chair and woke ready to bargain. He extended a card. "Samuel O'Connor, Corporate Counsel. We will take full statements. And Miss Ellison, on behalf of the company, I offer our apology for the distress caused and the interruptions to your travel." Maya reached for the card, but did not take it. Apology is the beginning of a sentence, not its end. The company has bylaws for a reason. She rested her palm on the counter near the speaker. The bylaws include a clause for material incidents involving significant shareholders. You know the one. Samuel cleared his throat. Section 14. Material incident affecting any shareholder with over 20% of voting shares triggers emergency governance procedures. Correct, Maya said. My grandmother holds a controlling block through Ellison Holdings. I hold a separate block. The incident began on the plane. It continues here at the gate. We will proceed under that clause until remedies are complete. There was a pause on the line that felt like a deep intake of breath before a verdict. Understood, the liaison said. The board is convening now. Vivian's voice returned. Silk over iron. Maya, are you prepared to address the board? I am, Maya said. And I would like the first part recorded here, so our witnesses know the path forward. Rachel looked from face to face, then straightened, as if she had chosen something inside herself. I will make a formal statement as well. My hesitation contributed to the harm. Dana shot her a look, then nodded reluctantly. It will be included. The agent angled the phone toward the air as if that could widen the room. The speaker tone shifted as multiple lines connected. Voices settled. Someone cleared a throat. The chair, a seasoned voice, spoke. Miss Ellison, we are in session. You have the floor. Maya gathered her breath. She stood at the gate with the quiet gravity of someone who had walked into a room and found it was already hers. This is a governance issue, she said, not a customer service incident. The facts are not in dispute. A paying passenger with a valid ticket was repeatedly targeted and removed from her seat. The pattern is consistent with bias. The company's values and bylaws require immediate corrective action. State your directives, the chair said. Directive 1. Public acknowledgement within 2 hours. Not vague. My name, the seat number, the verifications ignored, and the suspension of involved staff pending review. Directive 2. Immediate review of the past 12 months of seat downgrades and reassignments for patterns of bias. Conducted by an independent firm. Preliminary findings in 72 hours. Directive 3. A permanent anonymous reporting portal managed by a third party, with protections for employees and passengers. Directive 4. Mandatory training in bias recognition and de-escalation for all customer-facing staff with measurable outcomes tracked and published quarterly. Samuel scribbled notes but looked up as if gauging the temperature in the room without a window. Dana stared at the floor. Rachel stood with her shoulders square, as if the posture itself were an apology made solid. The chair responded. Acknowledgement approved. Review approved. Portal approved. Training approved. We will need to set budgets and timelines. Set them now, Vivian said. The tone shifted slightly, the way air changes before a storm. And make one more note. In light of this incident and its implications, Governance control for the duration falls to the largest individual shareholder in accordance with Section 14. Maya, do you wish to affirm your standing? Maya lifted her chin. Her voice was clear as glass. Yes. As of filings effective this morning, I hold 30% of voting shares in the airline through Ellison Holdings, distinct from the family trust. My position is the largest single block in company history. For the record and for the duration of this event, I accept operational authority under the Material Incident Clause. A silence followed that was not confusion. It was recognition. Even the air seemed to pause to mark the moment. The witnesses felt it without needing the language for it. Power had shifted, quietly, completely. Samuel looked at Dana. Dana looked at Rachel. Rachel exhaled, as if something long knotted had loosened in her chest. The chair's voice returned, formal now, noted and entered. Miss Ellison, please proceed as you see fit. We will support. Gloria's eyes were wet, but her smile was fierce. The woman with the cane, who had seen so much and endured so much, stood a little taller. Maya finally took the card from Samuel and slipped it into her folio. This work does not end at the gate. Prepare a room. The board will meet in person within the hour. And before the hour ends, your apology goes live. Yes, Ms. Ellison. Dana managed, the words landing with a new weight. Captain Harris inclined his head. He did not applaud. He did not cheer. He simply looked at Maya the way a man looks at a compass after a long night and sees north. Steady and undeniable. Maya turned to the witnesses, speaking not as a customer, but as someone who had just taken hold of the wheel. Thank you for standing here. If you choose to offer statements, they will be protected. If you choose to remain anonymous, your silence will still matter. Either way, this will change. Jordan lifted his phone, then lowered it again, overcome for once by the sense that some moments should be felt before they are shared. Gloria stepped closer and took Maya's hand. You did not wait for permission, she said softly. You did what needed to be done. Maya squeezed her hand. Then she reached for her bag, not as an exit, but as an opening. The path ahead was already taking shape. A conference room, a table, faces that would learn what accountability looked like when it arrived wearing composure instead of rage. She glanced once at the window beyond the gate where the plane waited, silver against the morning light. The sky was clean, the runway slick. The day had already turned. Time to move, she said. And the group made space as she stepped forward. The conference room overlooked the tarmac. Morning washed the glass in a clear light, the kind that makes steel shine and edges crisp. Inside, the long table was already set with water, legal pads, and the hum of tired executives trying to look awake and unafraid. The door opened. Conversation stopped. Maya Ellison stepped in with her folio held close, as if it were a compass. Vivian Ellison was on a wall screen, composed, a portrait of focus framed by the soft glow of a video call. Good morning, the chair said. We are in session. Maya took the head of the table without asking. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. You have my directives, she said. We are not here to debate whether they are necessary. We are here to make them real. Timelines, owners, proof of completion. The chief operating officer cleared his throat. We can begin with the public statement. Legal has a draft. Show me, Maya said. Samuel O'Connor slid a tablet across. The apology was crisp and spare. It named the flight, the seat number, and the failure to honor verified credentials. It acknowledged bias. It confirmed the immediate suspension of involved personnel and the launch of an independent review of seat downgrades and reassignments. It stated that training would be mandatory, measured, and public. Remove the phrases that soften responsibility. Maya said, "No, we regret." It reads like distancing. Keep "we acknowledge." Add the names of the accountable teams. People need to know who answers for what. Samuel made the edits, fingers moving faster than his face suggested he felt. He turned the tablet again. Maya read once more. "Send it." The communications director pressed her phone, pulse visible at her neck. "It is live." Silence followed, broken only by the soft chime of devices in the room. Notifications bloomed. Outside the glass, a jet pushed back from a gate as if drawn by an invisible hand. Inside, the company began to move too. "Next," Maya said. "The review, an independent firm within 2 hours. Preliminary analysis in 72. Patterns flagged by route, crew, time of day, and passenger demographics. Freeze on any discretionary downgrades until the first briefing." The head of operations nodded, scribbling notes. "Done. We will reroute exceptions to a central queue with oversight." The human resources director shifted in her chair. "Training curriculum is easy to promise and hard to prove. What metrics do you want to see?" "Completion is not enough," Maya said. "I want measured change, pre- and post-assessment, supervisor scoring tied to real scenarios, audit sampling by the independent firm to check whether learned de-escalation is used when it matters. Publish quarterly summaries, redacted where necessary, but honest in substance." The HR director exhaled as if the instruction had steadied rather than threatened her. "We will design it around outcomes, not attendance." Maya glanced to the corner where Rachel Kim stood near the wall, invited to remain despite the gravity of the room. Rachel's shoulders were square. She looked like someone who had decided to stop shrinking. "You will build the first witness intake today," Maya said, turning back to the table. "Names offered protection. Silence offered respect. Either choice honored. No retaliation, and penalties for those who try." The legal team murmured, "Protections will be written and posted before midday." A knock at the door. Dana Foster stepped in, relief and nerves sharing the same expression. "The statement is already trending. The comments are not all kind, but the clarity is landing. People are saying this feels different." "Good," Maya said. "It should." On the screen, Vivian spoke only once, but the words set the tone for the hours to follow. Accountability is not a public relations event. It is a series of honest steps taken in a straight line. Do not drift. The meeting became a rhythm. Assignments, deadlines, confirmations. At one point, the operations chief started to protest a timeline and then caught himself, choosing resolve over resistance. At another, the HR director suggested a pilot program for anonymous reporting, and Maya shook her head. "No pilots with people's pain. Build it at scale or do not build it." Her phone vibrated with messages she did not open. The world could wait. The work could not. Between agenda items, Maya let her mind wander for a moment to the gate, to the ring of witnesses, to Gloria's hand closing over hers, like a promise. She thought of the teen with the camera who had lowered it for once, recognizing that some moments needed to be lived before they were posted. She thought of the hush inside the cabin when fear dissolved and citizens replaced spectators. She shook herself back to the table. There was still more to do. "We have to discuss crew status," Samuel said carefully. "Suspension is in effect for the cabin attendant. There will be a process." "There will," Maya said, "and it will be fair. Discipline without humiliation, clarity without cruelty. People change faster when dignity is preserved. Use this to teach everyone what the line looks like and what happens when you cross it." Samuel nodded slowly, as if learning a new language in real time. Maya turned to the communications director again. "When the statement is up, push a second note directly to the passengers on last night's flight. Short, 'We saw what you saw. We acted. Thank you for witnesses. Thank you for courage.' That is the message." The director typed in a rush, cheeks flushed. When the last agenda line came, the room had shifted. It was not soft. It was not triumphant. It was organized. That was better. Maya set down her pen. "We will reconvene in 4 hours. Bring me receipts." She meant proof, and everyone understood. They stood, quiet and quick, as if leaving a chapel. Maya gathered her folio and stepped into the hallway, where the light was brighter than she expected. Rachel waited by the window, the morning sky catching the rim of her glasses. "I should have spoken sooner," Rachel said. Her voice did not tremble any more. It was steady and unadorned. "I will not make that mistake again." Maya regarded her for a long second. Then she nodded. "Keep the line open for the next person who needs it. That is how this spreads." Rachel nodded, a resolve settling across her features that had nothing to do with fear of the company and everything to do with loyalty to a better way of working. Downstairs. The lobby opened into a quiet corner where Gloria Bennett sat with a cup of tea she had earned by simply asking. She rose as Maya approached. The cane tapped once, like punctuation. They looked at each other and smiled, the tired smile of people who had been awake all night and still found the day worth meeting. "How does the sky feel from here?" Gloria asked. "Like it is wider than I thought," Maya said. "And closer." Gloria laughed softly. "You did not ask permission. You asked for names, for times, for light. That is the work. The rest is paperwork." Maya's eyes glistened. "Thank you for standing. You were a pillar when I was shaking. I have been that shaking girl too," Gloria said. "This is what we do. We stand for each other until the shaking stops." Jordan arrived with his phone in his hand, hair messy, eyes bright with a kind of disbelief. He stopped a few steps away, aware that he was inside a moment that deserved care. "I turned the stream off," he said, almost apologetic. "I just wanted to tell you, people are ready to write letters, to show up, to hold them to the timelines you set. It is not just noise. It cannot be noise," Maya said. "It has to be a map. Help them focus on the steps, dates, deliverables. Keep the energy disciplined." He nodded, pocketing the phone as if it had just become a tool rather than a trophy. "I can do that." They walked together toward the glass that looked out on the runways. Planes lifted, banked, and vanished into the cold light. The public apology landed on screens across the concourse. Some travelers paused to read. Others kept walking, their shoes clicking like metronomes. A few stopped and looked over at the trio by the window, recognition clicking into place. A soft chime sounded on Maya's phone. A message from Vivian. "Proud. Rest when you can. Work when you must. Call me tonight." There was a second message from an unfamiliar contact. FAA Policy Roundtable. Invitation to participate on passenger rights and crew de-escalation standards. Maya read it once, then tucked the phone away. One thing at a time. The work had already begun here. Thomas Green passed through the lobby flanked by a quiet supervisor. His uniform looked like a costume now, authority removed. He did not meet Maya's eyes, but he paused as he came near, as if bracing for a blow that did not arrive. Maya spoke first, voice even. There will be a process. Learn from it. Do not waste the chance. He nodded once, something like gratitude struggling with shame, then moved on. Outside. The wind carried the crisp scent of jet fuel and the faint sweetness of a bakery opening at dawn. Inside, a company began its slow turn toward honesty. It would not be perfect. It would not be clean. But it would be public, and it would be measured, and it would be real, because people had watched and then chosen not to look away. Maya rested her hand against the cool glass and let the cold steadiness travel up her arm. She felt the fatigue finally catch her, not as collapse, but as the body's reminder that she was human and not the symbol the internet had already made of her. She breathed in, breathed out, and allowed herself a minute to be a person in a quiet lobby while planes lifted into the morning. Gloria's voice was gentle. You know they will call you the youngest owner. They will make it a headline because it is easy to count years. They will talk about firsts. They will forget the verbs that matter. What verbs? Maya asked. Protect, build, repair. Gloria said. Make them write those. Maya smiled. Then I will give them verbs until they run out of paper. A reporter appeared at the edge of the lobby, held back by security ropes and the unspoken boundary that forms around real conversations. She lifted a hand without shouting. Miss Ellison, may I ask what you want people to take from today? Maya did not step closer. Her voice carried without effort. That dignity is not a seat assignment. That power is not the person who speaks the loudest, but the one who turns outrage into a plan. That none of us moves forward alone. She paused. And that this is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of how we will do things differently. The reporter lowered her hand. Thank you. Maya looked at Gloria. She looked at Jordan. She looked at the hallway that led back to the conference room and the table that awaited the next round of work. Then she looked through the glass again, where a small jet lifted into the blue and leveled, finding its line. She squared her shoulders. Time to go back upstairs. Gloria nodded. Go on, child. Own the day like you owned the night. Jordan fell into step beside her. Not as a broadcaster now, but as a witness willing to carry details to anyone who needed them. They moved down the hall at a calm pace that felt like a new rhythm. Not the frantic rush of damage control. Not the swagger of victory. Something steadier. The tempo of a plan. At the conference room door, Maya paused and touched the frame with her fingertips, as if marking the space for what it owed the future. She did not look at the wall of screens this time. She did not need to. She carried the room now in the same way she had carried her seat. Quietly. Completely. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded less like an ending than a hinge opening onto another room. The day began. What happened in 2A was never only about a seat. It was about a name spoken with respect, a life carried with dignity, and a line that should never be crossed. Maya Ellison chose patience over fury and precision, over noise. Gloria stood as witness. Jordan turned a camera into a chorus. Rachel found her voice. Captain Harris used his authority to protect, not to punish. The cabin learned that silence is easy, and that solidarity is harder and better. We condemn what tried to happen to Maya. We condemn the reflex that doubts a person before the scan even finishes. We honor the courage that says, I am here and I will not vanish. We honor the love that moves strangers to stand for one another. We honor the work that turns apology into repair. Carry this with you. Speak when a room goes quiet. Choose dignity for yourself and for the person beside you. Share this story if you believe that justice should travel with every ticket. Leave a comment with your thoughts or your own experience.